We're live. It worked.
Yes, we're live.
Let's go. Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to Witch B1tch, where we talk the real tea. Today we have Kaylaa Kayce on the show, and she's a very fascinating woman. She's got a lot of stuff going on, and just I'm so excited about today's episode. So I think we should always start off our episodes by asking our guests, what was your awakening journey? Like, how did you wake up? Tell us that story.
Okay, not an easy question after like talking to you yesterday, which seems like only yesterday. First of all, thank you for the invite. Um, After seeing you, Juliet, on Soology, I knew I had to connect with you, and then it turns out you started your podcast, and then it's like,
Yeah.
let's just do this over the air in front of God and everybody. So
Yes.
although yesterday we jumped in, so it was really cool. So anyway, my awakening experience, there's really two, and when I think about it, and after listening to you, Claudia, talk about your being at the water and that kind of
Mm.
purging, it made me realize that only after I did a lot of my own healing and releasing that I was even open to anything happening. And just to put some context in it, family life growing up was pretty turbulent. I also grew up within the Catholic Church, which has its own set of programming.
Mm.
Um, all of this fear and internalized rage and things like that that grew out of that threw me into a really deep depression as a teenager. I functioned through my 20s, but this is all leading up to my story of I did some really intense therapy work when I was 28 and was able to release. I didn't even know it was rage. It was so turned inward. Um, Released a lot of that, a lot of the fear. And at that point, really separated my image of God and church, which already
Mm.
had me condemned to hell. Um, while I was doing this parallel in my 20s of being introduced to metaphysical things and reincarnation and some
Mm.
astrology, I had both of those going, and I was still really trapped in to the horrible judging and condemning that I took upon myself. Um, and after this therapy, I got into a 12-step program that talked about higher powers. And it's like, wow, you know what? This fits, this consciousness, this something other than the old man in the clouds condemning me. Um,
Mm.
and it was through adopting that, meeting a sponsor, that she started talking about a higher power that was Jesus. And I'm like, oh, geez, no, I just let that all go. Go ahead. I like the lady. It seems like it'll work. So say Jesus, I'll just say higher power in my head. But what was missing when I separated into this higher consciousness source feeling, there was no intimate relationship. It was just like this nebulous morphing of something that wasn't bad for me, but it wasn't this intimate. I couldn't like grasp that. At least I grasped like the angry God, and it felt relational. So I didn't even know I was missing that until this woman starts talking about Jesus, and it felt like this was a friend of hers. And I just got so curious, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I turned this into like this playful curiosity, and I realized that's really been the theme over most of my life. Once I let go of some of the other depression and the anger, um, I thought to myself, so what would I do to get to know this Jesus person that she seemed so intimately supported by and loving. And so I thought, well, gosh, if there was somebody, a friend of mine that lived far away, I would become a pen pal. So literally, I became pen pals with Jesus. And I tell this
Cool.
story because I use this with the kids sometimes to like explore perhaps galactic families that they don't know. And it really is this manifestation technique that I had no idea what manifestation was or what ascended masters were. I just wasn't in that world like at all. So it was again intuitive, which I didn't even know what intuition was really. So I was 28 and I started journaling, and I titled each journal entry every night, and I did it every night religiously, no pun intended. Um, and it started with Dear HP for higher power. I hear your name is Jesus and you're a friend of so and so. I'd like to meet you one day. And that was it, like postcard size. And then the next night it's like, Dear HP, wow, I hope you write back one day. And so it was, and then maybe, Dear HP, you know, I had a really bad day at work. What kind of work do you do anyway? So I made it as if it was real, which is what we say manifestation and visualizing. I pictured him, a real person in, like, you don't know California, but like across the country for me. Um, I felt the emotion behind it and I took the action. And on day 17, I'm driving my little sports car around and my sunroof is up. And then all of a sudden, boom, in my passenger seat was this visceral energy that I literally had to turn and look to see like what just happened here, because there was something next to me. And in an instant, I knew this was whoever this Jesus was. It wasn't the Catholic Jesus that I had any sense of. And again, it was more of a brotherly companion. That awakening, I look at as a inner awakening, because while it changed my outer world, it didn't, like, we talk now about awakening and ascension and like these massive movements and commitment to really finding out what this was. I was far from still needing a lot of healing and stuff like that in my personal life. But so I had for about 7 years what I didn't even know were clairs developing. I mean, I would have this conversation, I'd see him, we'd talk, I'd journal, we'd invite my sister who had passed in, and we're having conversation. And I look back and going, wow, I that was so cool. And then after about 7 years, there was a shift. And it's like he took a deep dive, and I went through all kinds of abandonment issues and dark night of the soul. And fast forward 20 years, in 2012, well, in the meantime, then I started jumping into things like the Celestine Prophecy, Course in Miracles. I started learning about energy for the first time through that book. That book is just so sweet. If nobody's ever read that, it's old by now, but it's still, like, for me, my spiritual primer. And then in 2012, going through another really big dip emotionally and physically, and went out on disability from teaching. It was just, again, awakening, I believe, either happens when we like purge enough inside and open ourselves up, or some crisis that brings us to a knees of surrender. And I was in that state and met someone who I heard did Reiki. Didn't know what Reiki was, but I knew it was enough to like take some stress away and relax. So I got a session with him. He was an energetic medicine practitioner. Didn't know what that was. All I know is he's holding my feet, and then he put his hands on my ankle and my knees, and the flood of emotions that came so deep. 10 years of therapy never touched this grieving of a passing of my sister. Sobbing on the table in front of this guy I knew was a coworker, we're not talking about anything. And all he says is, just breathe through it. It's good. Literally, it was so embarrassing, but I let it happen. And just like that, maybe a minute and a half later, it stopped. It was done. It was, now I couldn't breathe and I'm laying on my back. So it was like a difficult 45 minutes to get through, but it was, I sat up and I looked at him and I said, this is not your mama's Reiki, is it? And it was so much more. It was his intuitive gift, his gifts, but it was at least the structure for opening that door, especially for someone who would probably get scared by the woo-woo of it all. And from that moment on, I started working with him every 2 weeks for clearing. And it was about 3 or 4 years of what I experienced as like the Amazon forest within. And there were cords and attachments and entities and like what felt like tree trunks being removed from my root chakra. I mean, it was very physical and it became very real. And that led to meeting people. Of course, synchronicities like accelerated greatly, and meeting people who did that kind of work and who were channeling. And I didn't know what to make of all of that, but I knew this changed my life. Whatever this is, I can't, how's this for some negatives? I can't not pursue, if that makes sense. It was it. It was, so how's that for a long answer?
So tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Okay, well, that whole unfolding led me to really wonder what I'm doing here. And if I started looking at soul's contracts and blueprints, and what I was doing at the time was I was teaching special education for kids with troubling backgrounds. I even hate to use this word, but it was kids with emotional and behavioral disabilities. Now that word disability, I just choke over, but that's the population I was trained to work with. And as I was doing that, again, it's like, is this really what I'm meant to do? And it's a traumatized, difficult group of kids. So each and every day felt like it was crushing my soul. And when I went and explored that I worked with a channel to get information, and it turned out that it's not really crushing my soul. My resistance to it isn't making it easy, but there's this presence that these kids are recognizing, soul to soul, higher self to higher self, that I'm a safe person, a safe soul for them to purge against. Now, in this human body, it was like, I'll just say, targeted both physically and emotionally. So it was really, really hard. And I just, this isn't what I'm meant to do, but I don't know what that is. So another awakening, perhaps we'll say, synchronicity that led me to go to an expo that Mary Radwell, Australian. I've got a lot of Australian connections. She was giving a talk on the new human, which I had never heard anything like what she was saying. I barely got my head around like channeling, and I saw credible people, so I knew they weren't lying, but it's as far as I could extend my belief. Here she is talking about kids visiting spaceships at night and talking about living on other planets and hybrid, like part human, part extraterrestrial. And I'm like, what am I listening to? At the same time, I've never had this experience. It was like this popping in my head, and I could barely hold a thought. while I was in disbelief of my sitting there listening to this. And it was that moment that I understand what the phrase key code activation was. And it opened the door to then join a program that helped me discern what my gifts are and what the patterns of my life have been, to give me an indication of what the passion is of my soul. And 6 months later, I'm running a group within this organization for conscious youth. Like, prior to that, I don't know what a conscious youth is. So it was like, probably in anybody's journey, until you do it and take action, you're not even going to have what it is revealed to you. It's kind of like a spiritual need to know basis, which was so hard to do. It's like, no, I want to land a lit. I want the details first so I can be prepared, so I can so it was really interesting. And 3 years of really working with kids, and then realizing can't work with kids without hello parents, they're the companions of these kids on the journey, as you well know, both of you. And after 3 years of really within this organization and realizing what's bubbling up is my own unique vision and what I was here meant to do. And so I, a year ago, kind of left the nest and started my own Young Ascended Masters group, brand, business. I don't know what to call it because it's service, so talking business is uncomfortable, I'll admit. So I've been doing this for a year, and right now have remote groups going on for kids, right now limited to 8 to 18, and parent groups, and really taking hold on re-envisioning this, and my own additional gifts are popping up. It's such an exciting time. I mean, I'm 60. I'm going to be 63 years old in the fall, and I feel like I'm just opening up to this. My family wants to know when I'm retiring, and I'm like, oh, seriously, we have to have that conversation again. Yeah, they don't know what they know what I'm doing. They can't really go beyond wanting to know further. So it's coming to you both together in this podcast. I just so want to know what your experience is as you're even commingling your missions. And I know we talked last night, it's more of a complementary thing, but golly, what's it like to raise someone who is one of these starseed kids?
For me, it was challenging because I didn't grow up like Juliet grew up, and the times were very different. So she would bring these ideas and questions to me, and I was never closed to it, but I was not familiar. So if she came to me with a question like, "Mum, what's a conspiracy theory?" And I would be like,
Right.
"Why are you asking me this? Like, why? Where is this coming from?" But they were things like, because my kids don't watch television, so they were picking out the content that interested them from the internet, which is where they were getting their entertainment, their information, or whatever it was. And so Juliet would come to me with these questions, and I would be like, what? And so it grew from there. And then I had my own stuff going on in my own life, like adult stuff, that was starting to open my mind, and it all happened very intensely after my dad died. So we lost my dad to motor neurone disease, which I think in the States is called Lou Gehrig's disease.
ALS.
Yeah, ALS. And yeah, so that was devastating. That he deteriorated over a 2-year period from a very strong, capable man to being completely paralyzed and dependent on us for everything. And it was a hugely influential time in Juliet's life too, because she was, I think you were 9 when it started.
Yeah, 9 to 11.
Yeah. And I gave up work to care for my dad. I moved in with him because my mum she didn't have the cognitive ability to move all the machines and do the things that she needed to do to help him. So I gave up my job and moved in with them and left my family to do that.
Yeah.
So
Every week.
Every week. So I would be at home with them on the weekends, but with my dad during the week. And so it changed our lives completely. And so I did this huge, like it was a massive soul searching thing for me because I was faced with death every day. I had to face it in my dad's condition. Yeah, so all that change in me, internal change, happened around that time, and it continued to happen for me for years later. Because Juliet came to me and she said, Mum, why is there no cure for motor neurone disease? And that started a whole conversation with her. And she decided through that exploration of that question that she wanted to raise money for research, to research a cure. And so that started us on another adventure of selling lemonade to raise money for a cure. And she created the business all herself with my husband and I's help, but she was the leader of that. And that took us 4 years all up. But in that time, it was a 2-year period of we raised close to $40,000, which paid for a researcher for a year at Macquarie University here in Sydney.
Wow,
And
that's remarkable. That's so
yeah,
awesome.
so that took 2 years, and then another 2 years of, you know, I don't know, like winding it down maybe. Like it took us 2 years to wind it down and to figure out what she wanted to do with it and that sort of thing. She got burnt out because she was doing it every weekend straight for that time. So
Were
she
you
got burnt out
homeschooling
from
at the
that.
time, or were you going to
No,
main school?
main school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it changed. I mean, it influenced everything for us. It influenced the people we were meeting. It influenced Juliet's school life. It influenced our home life. It changed, like that experience changed everything.
And we also learned a lot about the system and the loopholes that a lot of those higher up people know about and abuse to get away from things. And it was interesting because we're obviously going in this with the purest of intention, like not even knowing that these loopholes
Very
exist.
innocent.
Yeah. And then we're just seeing the abundance of corruption in, what happens when you have a foundation, things like that. Like,
Wow.
and that's why so many people so many big rich people have foundations, because of the amount of loopholes it provides them.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it breaking into anything like that is very difficult because you're viewed with suspicion, and people, like, there's these two levels. There's people who understand it and are doing it, and then there's people who kind of go, what? Like, isn't that illegal? And it was just, I don't know, it was a massive learning curve and an eye-opening experience. And through all of that, the people that I met, they started to introduce me to ideas and, similar to your story, where I was getting information from outside of myself that was explaining things that were going on in the inside of myself and broadening my mind. And so one day I think I told you this yesterday, I realized I had a lot of anger in me. So I'd been taught how to do an anger release. And I went to the ocean and did an anger release at the ocean, standing on a cliff. And I just screamed at the ocean. No one was around. I asked Juliet to come with me and she was scared. She was like, no, I'm not going. I'm going to stand back here.
Yeah.
And so I just screamed it out. And from that experience of screaming it out, physically felt the emptying of the emotion out of my body. And that made space for the ocean to bring me a whole heap of information, and it just penetrated my being.
Do you think you still are processing that information?
Oh, 100%. Because there was so much of it. Like there's some things like the key codes that you were talking about that they're in here, but I don't fully understand them. I'm sure I will one day when I'm ready, but yeah, it hasn't happened. Not everything has been kind of fully integrated and understood in my body.
Yeah.
But that's where it's held. It's held in the body. That information is held in your physical being like strands of DNA.
Yeah.
And when you allow yourself to clear out the emotional baggage, like you did with your Reiki, you got rid of a lot of stuff, all the tree trunks and all of that.
Great image.
Yeah, it makes room, in my experience, it makes room for the information to come in and become part of who you are. And it's like your cells just know that it's true. Like I can now tell when someone's lying. Like I said to you yesterday, there's like a feeling of geometry not fitting perfectly together when someone's lying to me. But when I know it to be true, the feeling is the geometry sits in its place like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
It sits right within me. And it's like a knowing.
Yeah. I love
an
that. I
internal
love
knowing.
that geometry description. It's so like,
Yeah, like a puzzle inside, and
I
it kind of
get
goes
that.
click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about the kids I work with, and Juliet, will be interesting if you share the same thing with that, knowing when people aren't telling the truth. I mean, they're also highly empathic, and what they sense is the person's energy while they're hearing their words, and the words don't match what their body is picking up.
Yeah.
And some of the most challenging times, one, I say to parents, it's almost begging parents, if you struggle with believing some of the fantastical experiences that the kids are having, don't say that you do. Like I'm picturing Mary Rad, like the little kid who runs out of his room going, "Mommy, I was on a spaceship last night." And it's oh, that's nice, honey. That's really good, and even play, well, versus the parent that would say, "Oh, you're just making that up. Don't be silly."
Yeah, right.
But even to say, "Yeah, that's great," but they're going to feel that skepticism. So if really you have that skepticism, I say, like, believe or believe in. So believing in the child's experience as being real for them, there's ways to explore it with them. Well, tell me more. And you're not giving that contrast, because how could it be any worse than for a kid to think that their parent is lying to them?
Yeah, exactly. Like even if you can't wrap your head around something, which is what was happening for me with Juliet, I couldn't wrap my head around the concepts that were coming out of her mouth. But I never said to her, "Oh, don't go down that road." Like, I just was like, "I don't know." You'll have to find that out, because I've never heard that before or whatever. And so I mean, I'm not saying I was a perfect parent by any means, but if it was real in my mind, if it was real for her, or if she was curious about it, who am I to say, oh, don't go there? Or, I mean, that's her life. That always made sense to me. It's her life. If she wants to explore something, go for it. Because I trust her. There's just like, I just trust that she's going to figure it out and it's going to be okay,
Yeah.
and it's fine. And that if she feels brave enough to come to me to ask the question, I feel privileged to be that person that she's asking.
Wow. Well, give yourself a
You
pat on
know?
the back, truly, because it not every person who's a parent has enough inner knowing or healing or strength to like be guided by their child. And one of
Yeah,
the
I think
things
because
that
I didn't have that with my parents. I did a little bit with my dad, but definitely not with my mum. And I didn't want that for my kids. I didn't want to get in their way of the things that they found to be important to them. No matter how weird or wonderful they were, if they were passionate about it, that was the important thing to me, was their passion.
Yeah.
And that they felt supported in that decision to go forward. Because how else are they going to learn in life to go for something and feel confident enough to explore it and to see if they wanted to go down that road if they don't have their parents cheering them on, going, yay, go for it. How are
yeah.
they don't learn how to become self-sufficient if they don't have that.
Yeah. Well, Juliet, I was impressed last night when you were talking about researching and how you two are doing that other podcast or recording. I just keep thinking about that. We definitely have to talk more. But to hear you were a researcher way back 10 years ago makes me think of something I heard not too long ago about paying attention to our kids' passions, which I've always known. But for example, people who homeschool and are concerned with, well, my kid's not going to know enough math, or they're not going to, all that stuff that are legitimate to a point. But our soul is going to drive us to the interests that it wants to learn if we let that happen, which is why, again, schooling and the shift to homeschooling for many of the parents of these kids, of these new human kids, as they struggle more in school, whether it's because like one girl was learning about the Trail of Tears here in the United States in their history class, and literally a calm, gentle child got so angry that she literally threw her history book across the room and stood up and said, "That's not how it happened," because she's having past life recall of being on that trail as a Native American and reading a bunch of garbage in a history book. That
Wow.
isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
cool.
God.
So as a
Yeah,
teacher,
that's
it's
cool.
like, you know what? Teachers, we have no idea what reactions are that we judge as emotional disturbances or, I worked with kids in a high school that literally, one, they were medicated on so many different things. And again, truly had severe, severe trauma in their life. And this alternative school was the only chance society was really giving them. And this girl would have these emotional outbursts that literally she'd be sitting in her desk, sometimes even with her head down, and jump out of her seat, start screaming and raging and run out of the hall. And it would take 20 minutes to get her back in the room, if that. And as I started working with multidimensional, quote unquote, gifted children, realizing emotional download, energetic downloads are happening all the time. And are the kids I'm working with that society classes as disabled really these crystal children who have never had a nurturing environment in a way that anybody was aware of these things? And am I witnessing download after download into a body that can only explode because there's no tool? We know when we get downloads what it feels like in our body and like that integration time. Truly, how do you explain that to an 8-year-old or a 16-year-old? Or, and I was in a facility that they had to be really careful in even, okay, there was some social emotional programming, which I was very gifted to like be a part of and train in. But I looked at my students really differently after I had this awakening for myself and started working with these kids. And like by day, I'm working with rageful, emotional kids. By night, it's the spiritually gifted. And I'm hearing from parents that, they're having emotional outbursts and they're recognizing it and they feel so bad afterwards. And they come and they say, I don't know what happened. And they don't, and it's.
I can relate to that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think for me, I've never had, growing up, I've been always sensitive, but I've never had like past life visions or seeing other beings or even like conscious downloads. Like I don't remember ever having downloads.
But you have feelings.
But yeah, I feel everything. Sometimes I get angry and I don't know why. I would get like frustrated to the point of tears about simply being told to hang up my clothes. Like, I think that happens for a lot of kids, but yeah, it was just all the time being sensitive and not really knowing what I was feeling.
Yeah, and I think Juliet, she can take on other people's energies.
Yeah, I was just about to get to that.
Yeah, and she's only just learning that they're not her energy, and that she needs to differentiate between what's hers and what isn't.
Yeah.
Because it can get very fuzzy and confusing.
Yeah, and I think because I'm still learning, like it's been really hard. The more that I'm learning, the more I realize just how sensitive I am. And I think that that's something that is a really beautiful thing. It's just where I'm at now, the sense, like how sensitive I am, it's really difficult to navigate things. And once I I don't want to say overcome, but just
sort it out.
Yeah, once I sort it out and figure out how to
become more aware.
Own my own energy, and that's it, no one else's energy. I know that that's when the visions will come in. That's when I will be able to access the Akashic records of myself. I know that that's the time when I'll be able to receive the magical, like higher realm sort of things. Like I'll be able to receive from that sort of place instead of just being overloaded with other people's energy all the time, because it's really difficult. And yeah, sometimes I do get really angry for no reason. Other times I'm crying. Other times I'm being overwhelmed, because I think what happens is, like, when my energy is mingling with other people's energy, it brings up my own wounds that match theirs. Like their wounds will come out in me. And even though I have these wounds, it's not the divine timing for them to come up, because I just get overwhelmed because I now have like all these wounds showing themselves to me and I don't know how to do anything. It's like I can't even, there's like hundreds around me, I don't even know how to begin with this.
It's overwhelming.
So
and you're it's 20. Well, first I want to explain why I just am breaking out into this big grin as you're talking about these difficult things. Like, oh, is she really insensitive? When you're speaking as if these things, you're not consciously aware of these things happening for you. And and I think back to last night, and you're saying, oh, I really want to astral travel and I'm not doing it yet. And that experience of last night like blew me away in the feedback that you gave me. I thought about it all night. And it's just like providing opportunities like that kind of energy work to the kids that I'm working with. I need to do that more to give them that experience, because just like yourself, they're like, well, it's that comparison. You know, I see other people or other people talk, and not so much among the kids because they don't talk or really understand it as much to put language to it. But just that judging, it's like other people talk about this and it's not happening to me, and finding ways to have the kids or even adults recognize that it really is happening. It's just not the way I expected it to look, or I have voices in my head that are all mine. I don't know if they're inspired or not until we have a place to talk about what it feels like. What does it look like when you say you've got guides? You thank your guides for inspiring. I mean, what are you hearing? And then you realize, oh my gosh, that is my experience. You're just expressing it in words that make it sound like something I only imagine differently, if that makes sense. I don't know how I got off on that, but there's something else. What did you said? Sometimes reminded me of the kids. It'll come back.
The fuzziness between her own feelings and
Yes,
other people's.
thank you. Yeah, the empathic exercise to be taught like how that can happen. One of the most fun experiences, and I was about to share this in that 31 days series of videos that I put out and never got a chance to finish, but I'll tell this story now. And there was a mom with a 6-year-old who was too young for my groups, but really needed some support in how do I keep his gifts alive. I mean, he's talking to deceased people and sees blue avians, and his best friends are these spirit collectives that I never even heard of before. And he was definitely hyperactive, not labeled ADHD, but like definitely falls into that abundant energy, we'll just say. So I met with them, and part of what I knew about him was that taking on feelings. And he couldn't even go out to a mall or do anywhere else without being totally overwhelmed. And how do you explain to a 6-year-old like what's happening in a way that they can at least energetically release without fully having to understand it? And here's this kid. So I talked to the kids about their abilities as superpowers. And the younger ones, to get that immediate connection, you were on Zoom, a 6-year-old, it's an old lady, you know, who do I care if I'm talking to her? You get their attention for about a minute when you hold your cat up, and, you know, after that, it's all over. So I'm watching this kid. We're talking about Spider-Man as his super character that he loves. And I'm about to try to like spidey senses, you know, a way to get in to talk about his abilities. And he was more interested in showing me how Spider-Man jumps from building to building. So he's jumping off the couch onto the chair, runs back to the computer. Did you see me? And he's jumped. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what other tool in my toolbox to help me focus as a child. And there was like 20 minutes into an hour-long session, and I'm going to just grab this. So I had this. I said, you know what, Dante, your mom tells me that you're like Magneto Man. And he starts going, wait, what is she saying? If you know Magneto Man from the X-Men, you know, all these metal things. I said, you're like Magneto Man. And on my desk, I had some sticky notes. And I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. But I said, it's like you go somewhere and everything sticks to you. Like you've got mad attached to you there, and then there's sad, and then there's angry, and then so I filled myself with all of these sticky notes, and he didn't take his eyes off the screen. And I said, and all of these are somebody else's. They're not even yours.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do to get rid of all these things? And so, and truly energetically, if we swipe, if we perceive the energy as draining off of us, salt baths, crystals, all of those things to really release the energy, meditation, 6-year-old doesn't know. So we're like, okay, so jump up and down and just get that movement with his hyperactivity. So we're both, I can't believe I was doing it too, but he's jumping up and down and playing. And I said, keep going, and see if any of these sticky notes are left and they're falling off. And if there's any left, then take your arms and go like this. And then to finish, I said, now get really still and feel as if you're standing out in the rain and you're standing on the grass barefoot and you're letting all the rain wash all the rest down. And you're going to know that you're done because your toes are going to start squishing in the ground. So in the meantime, we're energetically like draining and doing some grounding, and kids just think it's a blast, having fun, being playful. So,
that's
there's
great.
ways to do that. We got done, and the mom sent me an email like not more than 24 hours later saying, we got off. Guess what we had to do? We had to go buy him his own sticky notes. So for days, when he felt himself ramping up, he would do this. And it was just so affirming, but it's simple little things like that. And one of the things, Juliet, that came to mind to practice identifying what's your energy and what's somebody else's. My own energetic healing guy told me this: go to a mall and just sit and watch the people pass by you. Get in touch with your own sphere of energy, and then open your awareness up as various people walk by. What's happening in your own energy field? And you're going to run across anxiety, and you're going to run across happiness, and you're going to run across conflict in a conversation of somebody walking by, and then clear it, and then come back to yourself and let it happen and really get a sense of knowing the difference. Now, it doesn't happen. Well, maybe it'll happen right away. I don't know. But that's one way of really consciously feeling it. And then once you know it, and you know whether it's yours or someone else's, which I thought was, like, as Australians say, brilliant.
So that's kind of like practicing a new language. It's sort of like Braille in a way, like feeling
spiritual Braille.
Yeah, like
what? Oh, that's perfect.
The frequency of my energy and what's the frequency of theirs, and knowing the difference.
It's learning the language of your own energy.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to the shop. Well, in Australia, we don't call it the mall. We call it the shops. I'm going to the shops today, so I'm going to do that, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, well, cool. Let me know. Let me know how that works for you. Yeah. And the other thing I really want to mention, and whether that would ever work out with your time zones or not, everything you're saying about just how confusing things are. Okay, so you're 19, 20, right? 20? Did you just turn 20?
Yeah, 19.
As I work with kids over the last 4 years, to my heart's woe, they're now 19, 20, 21. And it's awesome to see them stepping into, this new space, and gosh, the graduations and the acceptance into college, all that stress, all that other stuff is perfect grounds for, let's talk about what discerning is, and intuition, and following your own passion, and, that stuff. It's been really active in my teenage group. But what I really am feeling drawn to is creating a support space for perhaps seniors in high school through college age. Now, not everybody goes to school, and people are working and raising kids and in that age group, but to really put a structure together. Not that it's more community building and just conversational, not necessarily developing gifts yet. That's a conversation, but somebody suggested almost like a college drop-in coffee shop, depending on their schedules, just have 2 hours available where if they can come in for 20 minutes just to like check in and get that support. I don't know how that's going to work. I'm waiting for a couple of the young people, I still say kids, to come back with scheduling for the fall, to see how that would work. But that would be so much fun if it was later in the evening that you'd be available to join. But it's that support that's
I would
really,
love to.
yeah, it's really cool.
I like that idea. I think that's great.
Yeah, I really thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
if
we're
anybody's listening that has college age kids, like pick their brains. And what holds me back for so many things I want to do is times and evenings and like adult programs you can have in the middle of the day and hit 2 or 3 time zones. And like the kids, unless they're homeschooled, evenings, and then it's extra sports, and is Saturday or Sunday better? And so we'll just put this out there. If anybody, like, I want to start some kind of meditation groups, whether it's for kids or adults. So if anybody's listening, you want to be part of meditation, throw me some ideas on what are best times and family times and stuff like that. That it's just, I want to put out a survey saying, please respond. And then I just never do. But so I now know you guys are 14 hours ahead.
Yeah.
So plan appropriately.
So Kaylaa, we're at 52 minutes. And I know you wanted to talk about a special offer that you have going.
Well, yeah, after talking to you yesterday, it's like, okay, well, let's do this. So every month I have the youth groups going on Tuesday nights, my time Eastern, like at 7:00. And I have once a month, we have a guest teacher come in where the whole group, 8 to 18, gather, and we have topics like palm reading this month. Next month, it's going to be shamanism and the medicine wheel. After that, light language. So it's special topics one evening a month. And then the other 2 Tuesdays is divided into a group for 8 to 12-year-olds that we just talk, myself in the group, and do exploring these various issues. They love to talk about their own experiences. And then one for teenagers. So there's 2 small groups and then this joint group. And then twice a month, we have a support group for parents. So what I'd like to offer anybody who's listening is a free month of that cycle. So if you have an 8-year-old, the only way my website, I've got a website up now too, youngascendedmasters.com. I'm so proud of that. It just came out, published last month. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to accept like coupons for Witch B1tch listeners or whatever. So if you send me, anybody who sends me an email, Kaylaa@youngascendedmasters.com, just say that you heard this podcast and let me know how old your child is, and I'll just send you direct links. Let me know what month. Go to the website, actually see what teachers are scheduled, if that matters to you, or if you just want the experience. And, do join us for 2 parent nights and have your kids join us and check us out. So
awesome.
Really a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
What a good deal.
Yeah, I think that's great.
What a good deal. Yeah. Well, it's it's not really about even a fee, although as I go step full time into this, it's just part of and for yourself and all these conversations, it's to sustain yourself in this world, in this 3D world, is all about 3D, but not making it so inaccessible to people.
Yeah.
So again, for a month, I'd much rather have the kids have the experience and we work out the details as
Yeah.
as needed.
Sounds good to me.
tradition.
Fair. I think
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Thanks,
for,
Kaylaa, for your time today. We
Oh,
really
yeah.
enjoyed
Amazing.
talking to you.
Yeah, this was fun. You guys are so awesome. I just
Thank you.
love
You
it.
are too.
Yeah.
We'll have you
So-
on again. We'll definitely have you on again if you're willing to come back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be sweet. So,
Awesome.
okay. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a good day. I'll have a good evening.
Yes.
Yes.
And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Yeah, and